And now it's time to preview an upcoming game with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a Kickstarter preview. This time we're going to take a look at Heavy Steam, which is a steampunk combat game in which each player controls a titan, steam-powered of course, that's trying to maneuver around the battlefield in order to eliminate their opponent, or in some of the different scenarios accomplish a different objective. These titans are powered by steam, which will flow throughout, and you'll have to maneuver that steam to different areas in order to power them, to your legs to move, or to your arms in order to shoot your guns, or perhaps to the vent in order to relieve some pressure, or to your head in order to out-strategize your opponent, buying cards and getting the initiative. So real quick, why don't we take a look at what you're going to get inside of the game. Reminder that these are prototype, not final components. We'll see how the game plays, and then we'll come back here at the end, and I'll sum it all up for you. So here you can see Heavy Steam all set up for a two-player game. The game will play 3 or 4 in teams, 1 versus 2 or 2 versus 2, but we're going to look at the two-player game. Each player in this sense is controlling a heavy titan that are out here on the boards. These titans are kind of more durable. They're going to result in a longer game, but you could play light titans, which will have a little bit less durability. They'll take less damage, and of course the game will end earlier. They're going to play by moving around on this board out here, and you'll see the board is divided into numbered segments. Moving closer to your opponent will allow you to get into range to attack them, but if you get too close, they may not be able to shoot you, and hopefully you'll have a hand-to-hand weapon to be able to hit them. So you're going to be maneuvering forward and backwards to try and get into range or avoid your opponent's attacks. You're also going to have the option of buying cards that are over here along this side, and these cards are going to modify several aspects of the game. For example, we have things like Enemy in Sight, which will let you move steam around your Steam Titan. We'll cover steam in a moment, because that's the most important part of this game. But you'll be able to move steam around your Titan in order to get steam to your weapons and hopefully shoot them earlier in the game. Or you have things like Terrain, which when you move, you can place, and these are going to give you some type of modifier. The Ruined Abbey here gives you extra defense while you're in it, and can take up to 3 damage while you're there, so if it takes some damage, it'll last for several turns, unless you move out of it. Buying these cards has a cost that's in the top right-hand corner to Steam, which you will have to spend from your Titan's head in order to buy them. So you'll move Steam into your Titan's head, spend that Steam, buy the card, and have the advantage later. These cards, the closer they are to the deck, will have additional costs printed on the board. For example, the Abbey right now costs 2 plus 3. So you're going to be playing out on this board, moving back and forth, buying cards, in order to hopefully destroy your opponent's Titan. But how are you going to do this? Well, when you get into combat, you're going to be rolling dice. You'll see we have these here. These dice have 2 different symbols on them. They're going to have critical symbols, and they're going to have basic hit symbols. Crits will let you place some of the damage on your opponent's mech, and they'll also damage terrain, like I said earlier, whereas regular hits are simply regular hits. So you're going to, based on your range and what weapon you're firing, roll some of these dice in hopes of getting symbols. What you need to do is beat your opponent's number of symbols on whatever defense dice they get. The more steam they've used, the less dice they'll get to roll, and hopefully you'll be able to outpower them with your roll. Now in this case, I wouldn't have. I have only hit 2 versus 2, but if my opponent had rolled more poorly, this would be a hit, and I would place damage or damage the shields on their Titan. In addition to all of these, you'll see that we have a d6 in order to randomize where you're going to hit. You'll need to roll 2d6 in order to figure out where your attacks hit when they do hit. You're going to have some little miniatures here that have soldiers and cannons that you can use by getting battle cards to let you place them out on the board and have additional attacks. These are going to be their own units that will move with your Titan when it moves, but they're going to get separate attacks based on their range, 0 to 3. They'll roll 4 attack dice, and they'll do 3 damage if they do hit, getting more hit symbols than your opponent rolls symbols on their defense dice. And the same is true for the infantry, the soldiers that you can get. And you can place these out on the board. They have a little bit different stats. They have more defense dice when they're being attacked, but they're not quite as strong in doing the attacking. Finally, there's going to be an initiative marker and some cubes that are over here. The initiative marker will go to whoever has more steam in their Titan's head during the initiative round. So allocating steam to your Titan's head will be important in order to get initiative and act first. The cubes you see over here represent different things. We have steam cubes, which we'll cover momentarily. We have shield cubes, which are blue. We're going to have damage cubes. These are the bad things you don't want to get. And we're going to have these orange cubes, which will be red eventually, but these are going to be kind of overload cubes. If you spend too much steam in one of your areas, you'll get some of these cubes that will go into your pressure builder, and hopefully you won't overload, but you'll put some of these over there to show that you've kind of overworked one area of your Titan. Now that I've showed you all of these components, I'd like to go show you the main component of the game. We won't be coming back to this board, but note that when I talk about moving, I'm talking about moving your mech forward and backwards. When I'm talking about combat, I'm going to be talking about rolling these dice and hoping to outroll your opponent, scoring more hits than they have defense, and various other things will play out on this board, such as playing terrain. So just note that all of that plays out on this board area, and the rest of this we're going to be showing for the player area as to how the game functions. So here we can see two examples of player boards. We're looking at the CET Heavy Titan, and we have the British Light Titan over here. And usually you're going to be playing CET versus the British. Now, I've got the CET Heavy Titan all set up for a starting game, but I wanted to quickly show the differences. So each of these Titans is going to be laid out differently, and they're going to have more or less areas depending on Heavy or Light Titan for holding steam, which are these white cubes, which is essentially the power you're going to use to move your Titan, to fire with your Titan, to power your shields and hopefully defend against other attacks or do various other things throughout the game. So you can see that there are more areas here and less areas on this smaller Light Titan. In addition, there's going to be a number in this top left corner here, and this is the number of customization points you can use in order to modify your Titan from its starting scenario. You can see that we start with 3 weapons. We have a rocket launcher, a Gatling cannon, and a Magna Coil blunderbuss over here. So you kind of have a machine gun, a rocket launcher, and a sort of shotgun that you're going to be using throughout the game. You can change these by using the weapons that are provided, and these all have points that they cost. They're in the upper right-hand corner here that you can use to customize your Titan and change the weapons they have. So maybe instead of your Gatling cannon, you'd like to have a small projectile launcher. These are different because the ranges you have on them will vary. At 0 to 1 range, this will use 5 dice and do 1 damage. The farther away you get, the less dice you use, but the damage is going to stay the same for this gun. And it also has something called rate of fire, which means that every time it shoots 4 different bullets. So, once you get 2 steam on it, you can fire it and get 4 shots. Or maybe you want to have something where you need to get in close range, and you can hopefully avoid some ranged attacks. So you move in, and when you're close range, meaning you're on the same square as somebody else, you're going to use some dice and attack and hopefully do a whole boatload of damage. But you need to be close in order to do it. Or perhaps you want to get something that's not a weapon but has a special effect that lets you buy cards first whenever you have it full of steam. Or finally, you have things like the rocket launcher, which we already have one, but maybe you want to equip a couple of them in order to do a lot of damage along the way. So you're going to be able to customize your mech with those. In addition, sorry, Titan, not mech. But in addition, you're going to be able to choose a captain at the start of the game, and each one of these sheets has a captain or commander area to place this person on. This is going to give you a special ability throughout the game, and it's also going to give you a one-time use ability that you can have in order to kind of try and gain an advantage. So for example, this one says that this one does not add extra steam to boiler pressure from cubes in red boxes and weapons. We'll cover that shortly, but essentially if you overload an area, you're going to have to put stuff into your boiler pressure area, which is going to reduce the number of defense dice you can use and kind of hold up some of your energy, your steam energy, that you want to use to power your Titan. And then it also says once per game, you can move bleed steam directly to the Steam Titan's boiler instead of to the power reserve. As you use steam, it will go into the boiler pressure, then it will go into the power reserve, and eventually back into the torso boiler of your Titan here, and distribute amongst the Titan. This will let you move it once per game directly from here into the boiler so that you can bypass this power reserve. So now that we've looked at some of the customization options, different captains, there are several of those, and all types of different weapons, let's talk about how the game is going to work using these Steam Titans here. So, as I said, each player is going to control one of these Steam Titans, and it's going to start out with a similar layout to this. The white cubes here are steam that you're going to use to power everything in your Titan. These blue cubes here are shields that you're going to have that allow you to protect from being hit. And every time you move a white steam cube into one of your shield areas, you're going to get a blue shield cube to go along with it. Just kind of helps power up your shields a little bit faster. Your Titan is also divided into several other areas. You have your boiler, which is where your energy is going to start, and also one of your few areas you need to protect, because if it ever gets filled with damage, you're going to lose the game. You have a repair center where you can remove steam in order to remove damage from your Titan. Then you're going to be moving into your legs, and the legs portion, this area right here, just holds steam, but the bottom area here, you're going to need 4 steam in order to move, and that's indicated right here on your board. 1 move, remove 4 steam. So, if in a future round I got 4 steam down here, I would be able to move them into my boiler pressure, 1, 2, 3, 4, and move my Titan forward or backwards 1 space. So, that's how movement's going to work. You need to get steam down into your legs. You're also going to see the shields are around here. We have leg shields, we're going to have left and right arm shields, and we have torso shields. These shields, as I discussed earlier, protect you from damage. So if you get hit in these areas, you're first going to remove steam cubes from them in order to protect, and then you're going to remove the blue cubes in order to protect you further. Once there are no cubes there, you start placing damage in the region that was hit. So if I no longer have any torso shields, I'm going to have to start placing black damage cubes for each damage I take into my torso, either into the torso boiler, the torso shield area, or the torso repair center, and eventually those will become disabled. The same is true for your arms, although your arms have several areas that are kind of holding. There's a steam holding area here that's between your weapons and the torso, and the same is true for your other arm. Over here you're going to have your weapons, which are attached to both of your arms, and in order to power these you're going to need to get steam into them. You'll see at the top left they have an attack cost, which is 2 steam, and anytime you use steam for an area, it's going to go over to this boiler pressure area, and the more steam you use, the less defense dice you'll get when you're being attacked. Each mech has a base of 4 defense dice, and as you fill up these different columns, you'll see it goes from 4 down to 3, down to 2, and if you're overloaded, you're only going to get 1 die. So the more stuff you do throughout the game, the easier you're going to be to hit. The question is, do you balance yourself between kind of building up steam, keeping your defenses high, or do you go all out and blast a lot of steam and hopefully damage your opponent? So, the way the game will work is first you go into the movement phase, and anyone who has at least 4 cubes in their movement can move those cubes from here over to their boiler pressure area in order to move. Now, I don't have 4, so I wouldn't be able to do this. If you had 6, you could move twice. So you could move forward twice, or back twice, or move once and stay wherever you want. But you can do this, removing those cubes and doing that. When you move, you're also allowed to play terrain cards. So I showed you those terrain cards earlier. If you would like to move, you can play a terrain card along with it. After we've gone through the movement phase, we're going to move on to combat. Now, combat requires that you have your weapons powered up, so eventually you're going to want to get steam into your weapons, and we'll cover how steam moves in just a moment. But if you have enough steam in your weapon to attack, and you're within range, you're going to roll a number of dice equal to the attack dice shown under your current range. This will never really change unless you have a card that modifies how many attack dice you use. So let's get a little bit closer example here. If I were at range 0 to 1 with this rocket launcher, I would be unable to roll to attack. You can see that here kind of. Hopefully it'll focus on it. But at range 0 to 1, I can't attack. If I'm at range 2 to 6, I'm going to roll 5 dice, and if I hit, it will deal 3 damage, but my opponent, of course, gets to block with their defense dice and hopefully roll more symbols to me than me to protect themselves. Once we've done combat, and that will alternate back and forth, I have a chance to shoot rolling my, let's say I roll 4 dice to attack, and my opponent rolls 2 dice to defend. This is a hit because I rolled more attacks than they did. I would then roll 2d6 in order to indicate where I hit, and then they would check and see if they had shields. Let's say I did 3 damage to their leg shields, or to their legs, and they have 3 shields there. They would then take 1 steam, move it to their boiler pressure area, and these 2 cubes would go away, and they're safe. If they had taken a 4th damage, they would be able to place one of these out onto their mech, and kind of indicate where they've taken some damage. Perhaps they decide that they don't need 3 or 4 holding spots for their legs, so they take 1 damage to their holding area in their legs, and they'll be able to move 1 less steam into that area in the future. Once I've made my attack, my opponent has an opportunity to attack back with any one of their weapons that they've powered up, moving that steam into their overload area, into their boiler pressure area, sorry, not their overload area, and reducing their potential defense dice in the future, but getting an attack on me. Then it would be my choice again, and I would have the opportunity to use any of my powered up weapons, moving that steam into the boiler pressure area and reducing my defense dice. So the more you use, again, the more defenseless you're going to be as time goes on. After we finished with combat, and this would be, of course, when any combat cards were played, we're going to go on to steam allocation, which is the main mechanism of this game, how steam moves around. Steam is going to have to travel along these little arrows you can see on the board here. They kind of move from the pressure area, or the power reserve, down into your boiler, and then from the boiler out throughout the rest of your Titan here. The best idea is to move things furthest from the center of your body first, but you must move them along these lines. So for example, I have 2 steam in my legs. Perhaps I want to move one of it along this line here into my shields. If I do so, I get an extra blue cube, and that will help power my shields faster. You know what? Maybe I move my second one down into mobility, getting geared up in order to be able to move, and then I will need 1 more down there eventually to move 1 space. From this point, I'm going to move the stuff in my torso repair center down along the line into my legs. I'll move both of them down there, preparing to move on a future turn and maybe power up my shields a little bit more. I have an energy in my arm, and I'm going to decide to put that down here into my blunderbuss, following this line, which will start powering up that weapon, which needs 4 energy in order to shoot, so I'm going to have to wait a little bit of time before I can fire that. But when I do so, I can spend extra energy in order to do extra damage. The stuff in my reserve of my left arm will move down and be prepared to either move into my left shield or into the blunderbuss in order to be able to fire it. Then I have energy over here in my right arm, and I'm going to start powering up my Gatling cannon, which will require 2 energy in order to fire, and since it has the rate of fire 2 ability, will shoot twice when it does so. I'm then going to move energy from my right arm down to the other portion of my right arm, preparing to move it into my shields or into my Gatling cannon. For right now, I'm actually going to ignore my rocket launcher because it takes 3 energy to get there, and I'm only allowed to move 1 each turn. Perhaps I'm just not so interested in firing with this rocket launcher right now, so I decide to ignore it. At this point, the only energy I can move, which has lines going from one place to another, is the energy in my boiler, which I have 8 of, and that's going to get replenished with 8 at the end of each of these rounds. So, I now have 8 that I can move to any of the immediately surrounding areas to the boiler. Perhaps I decide to move 2 of it into my head, which will give me some power for buying cards and will also help me with my initiative. I'm only allowed to move 2 there each round, so that's the most I can move. I also decide that I'm going to want some more energy in my arms, so I'm going to move 2 over to my arms, each of them, and I'm going to prepare that for moving either into my shields or into any of my guns. Finally, I'm going to move the last 2 down here into my torso repair center, which will move onto my legs, and finally down to the bottom, helping me be able to move. After I've done all of my allocation for the board, I'm going to move 8 energy, following this number right here, 8, from this power reserve center back into my boiler, which will be used for distribution in the next one of these Steam allocation phases. So you'll see that this will replenish based on how much is in this area, and if there's less than 8, you will get less than 8, and if your boiler has taken some damage, you may not be able to fill it up to 8. But anyhow, now that we're done with that, we're going to move on to battle card acquisition. This is when you may spend the Steam from your head in order to buy those cards that I showed you out on the board earlier. So these would slide from here into the power reserve, giving you more power to redistribute into your boiler later, and letting you buy a card. However, if you spend all of your Steam here, you're not going to be able to do well in the initiative phase, which comes next. So each player can buy a card. If they don't, one of the cards slides away. But then we move on to determining initiative, and that's when the initiative marker that I showed you earlier will get distributed. Whoever has that goes first in each of the future phases until initiative is changed again. Whoever has the most Steam in their head will get the initiative, so saving some of this may be good if you'd like to act first. Then we're going to go on to the pressure release phase, and that's when pressure that's built up over here in this boiler pressure area is going to relieve into your power reserve. So as I said, the more things you do, for example moving, we'll put cubes over here, and they'll build up, eventually reducing your defense dice. If I were to spend 4 cubes moving, they would build up like this. When we get to the pressure release phase, we're going to be moving 5 cubes from this area, last in, first out, back into our power reserve. And this will not only replenish the amount of Steam we have available, but it's also going to give us more defense dice as we go into the future rounds. Now, if we had all of these gauges filled and cubes down in the overload, we'd have to make what's called an overload check. And this would require us to roll a d6. So we'd find our d6, and we would roll it, and we need to roll a higher number than the number of cubes that are in our overload area. So if we had, let's see, there's 5, 4, and 3 is 12, 13 cubes, we'd have a 1 there, and we need to roll, well, essentially a 1 or better, which we would. But if we had 2 cubes there, we would need to roll a 2 or better. If we rolled a 1, we would take 1 damage to our boiler area, our torso, and that would be 1 black cube that fills this up, starting to remove Steam from the area, and also remove areas that we can store cubes in order to distribute later and power the rest of our stuff. Now you'll note that I'm trying to deal damage to my opponents and trying to fill up different areas, and sometimes the area you hit will be random. Maybe you'll damage their legs first, and you'll actually fill up all of these leg squares. And as you fill all of these up, you'll see that they are no longer able to move, and that's obviously not good for them. But you'll also note that there are special areas here with a +2 and a +3. When a cube gets placed in one of these areas, they must immediately roll a d6 and roll higher than the number that's there, or equal. If they don't, they automatically lose the game. Their Steam Titan blows up, and that's the end. And so you'll see it goes from 2+ up to 3+, and now when they roll, they must roll higher than a 3. They did okay, 3 or higher, and they're safe. You'll see that those exist in the legs, they also exist in the torso, so you'll want to fill those spaces last, and they're also up in the head. There are also spaces on weapons that when they get filled with damage cubes are going to cause the weapon to potentially explode, dealing damage equal to the maximum number that weapon can deal to the limb that it's on. So if this were to explode because you did not roll 3 or higher, you're going to take an extra damage or 2 damage to your arm when it explodes. Now that does not render the weapon unfunctional, but it does help distribute damage. If one of your areas ever fills up, let's say all of your leg spots are full, you're going to have to start distributing that damage to the next area attached, which in this case would be your torso. If the torso or the head ever fills up, or you fail one of these rolls, the game will end and the other player will be the winner. And there you have it. That is Heavy Steam from Greenbrier Games, currently up on Kickstarter and in its last 2 weeks of funding, looking for your support. A very interesting kind of mechanism with the Steam movement in this game that reminds me a little bit of a game that I enjoy quite a bit called Stronghold, where you're moving cubes along lines in order to get them to specific places in order to attack your opponent. Now this is more moving things to power your different Titan parts in order to deal damage, but the mechanism is similar, and it's a mechanism that I enjoy quite a bit. That allocation of cubes. It can be a little bit hard to track, but I think in the end, it's kind of a rewarding feeling getting things to where you want them to be. In this game, you're going to build up a little bit slower because you do have to move things from one area to the next. And sometimes you won't be able to get steam to your feet as quickly as you'd like in order to be able to move. So you have to plan in advance for that kind of thing. So there's a lot of planning that comes into getting things to the right area. You're going to want to defend areas pretty strongly, because if you lose your legs to combat and you can't place 4 cubes there, you're not going to be able to move your Steam Titan, and then you're going to kind of be at the whim of your opponent, who's going to have to move in or evade you by moving back and maybe stay out of range of your weapons. Do you want to allocate that steam to your head in order to be able to buy cards, or do you want to leave that steam in your head in order to have the initiative and act first? There are even little minis in the game, little cannons and stuff that I showed you at the beginning, that you can utilize to get extra attacks, and those will be on the battlefield. Do you want to eliminate your opponents cannons or soldiers before they attack you with them? Maybe having the initiative first and taking them out, or would you rather focus that damage on their Titan in order to eliminate them from the game? All of these choices are things you're going to have to make in Heavy Steam. As I said, up on Kickstarter now, looking for your support, so if this sounds good to you, go ahead, check them out, maybe even pledge.
Thanks for watching our review today. For more information about board games, as well as the #1 board game audio podcast, check out Dicetower.com for reviews, interviews, and more. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.